Okay. Under the Davidic kings, Gebirah, great lady, usually the mother of the king, held great power as advocate of the king. And this was not only with Israel, the nation, but all the ancient Near Eastern kings. Because they all had many wives, but only one queen mother, who was the next most important person in the kingdom next to the king. Okay? She had a crown. Okay, this summary was drawn from Professor Sri, okay, who gave the scriptural basis for these as well. A throne she had. She's mentioned before, the wives of the king, second only to the king, participates in his royal authority and shepherding the flock. And Bathsheba is one of those we look to in the Old Testament. She was wife of King David. When she was wife, she came before him and bowed down. But as queen mother, Solomon, her son, bows down to her. And she is seated at his right hand, a symbol for authority. The Queen Mother's intercessory role, an advocate, takes petitions from the people. We see this in 1 Kings. Solomon says to his mother, Bathsheba, seated at his right on the throne, "Make your request, mother, for I will not refuse you." In the footnote 8 in the text, there's a citation from Francois Rossier. He did his doctoral dissertation on the Queenship in the Old Testament. I had him as a professor in Dayton. As he points out, the fact that Solomon denied the request didn't make a difference. Okay? Because in the context of that story, he had a reason for doing so. As Paul pointed out, and as Dr. Shree points out, Isaiah 7:14, the woman, the virgin, the Alma, is understood as the mother of the king, another Old Testament basis. Now, the New Testament basis for this teaching, I quote here from an article that I ran across some years ago. I happened to look it up, and I found it on an EWTN website by Father William Most. And you had Father Most, of course, for class. I wish I did. He was a great scholar and a great Mariologist as well. He says the concept of Mary as a queen is found in the Annunciation narrative. The angel tells her her son will be king over the house of Jacob forever. So she, his mother, would be a queen. And as I pointed out earlier, the Archangel Gabriel's words were almost a direct quote, you would say, from the prophet Nathan's words to King David 1,000 years before, found in 2 Samuel 7. And also, Mary's visit to her cousin Elizabeth. Elizabeth calls Mary mother of my Lord. And my Lord is used as a royal title. St. Matthew, he associates Mary and Jesus with the Queen Mother and the royal son prophecy of Isaiah 7:14. In fact, he quotes, "The virgin shall be with child and bear a son and shall name him Emmanuel." Okay? So Matthew is giving us, you could say, a definitive interpretation of the Isaiah prophecy. Father Most says most of the fathers of the church picked up on this notion and from the Annunciation. And he says a text that's probably from Origen, okay, the great commentator on scriptures, died in 254 out there. There's an article from Marian Studies that's published at the Marian Library, by the way, in Dayton. Marian Studies, the 4th volume from 1953. Origen gave Mary the title Domina, the feminine form from the male masculine Latin Dominus, which is Lord. So we translate it lady. So she's the title Domina with Origen. Other fathers pick up on that. Patristic authors, St. Ephrem, Jerome, Peter Chrysologus. I think Dr. Sri names Augustine too. And about the 6th century, queen becomes a common term that's used. Another Old Testament, New Testament basis is Revelation 12 for Mary's queenship. The woman clothed with the sun, moon under her feet, crowned with 12 stars. And significantly, Revelation chapter 12 uses the Messianic Psalm 2, speaks of the child that will rule all nations with an iron rod. So another link to Mary, the mother there, as queen. Now, Dr. Sri points out, and all the good authors do that, the woman described in Revelation 12 is symbolic of the church. Some people have said, oh, it doesn't mean Mary. Yes, it does mean Mary too. It means the church and it means Mary both. And we have a lot of good commentary from patristic authors and throughout the tradition that give a witness to this. Okay, I'll just mention St. Bernard has a sermon on Mary's Assumption and the crown of 12 stars. And he speaks of Mary's queenship. And talks about the different virtues each one of the stars represents, but he's clearly referring to Mary as queen. You know, the mellifluous doctors, he's called. The crown is symbolic of Mary's queenship, of course, her royal authority, her victory, her conquest alongside her son. Moon under her feet, another symbol of her dominion, her subjugation of the enemies of Christ. And Revelation 12 portrays the woman as some type of a queenly figure. Dr. Sri says the Blessed Virgin Mary. He quotes Father Kerwin, who says the woman of Apocalypse 12 is the mother of the Messiah. Okay. Father Kerwin did his dissertation in the 1950s on the queenship of Mary before Pius XII wrote his encyclical. I had him as a professor too up in Dayton. He was a good scholar, Father Kerwin. I'm not sure if he's still alive or not. I think he may still be, but I'm not sure. Okay. So Mary is also a queen advocate. Dr. Sri talks about her advocacy linked with her queenship in the chapter that was assigned for today. And this is especially seen at Cana. We also see her advocacy in the late 3rd century prayer, the Sanctum Presidium, Reflata de Patronage, Holy Mother of God. And then Mary's queenship in tradition, the Salve Regina from the 11th century, the Regina Caeli, 12th to 13th century. There are other things from our tradition which point to Mary's queenship, recognized at the Rosary, the 5th Glorious Mystery, the Litany of Our Lady. There's a whole list of invocations of Our Lady, Queen of Heaven, Queen of Martyrs, Queen of Apostles, okay? Sacred art portrays her as queen. So we have this strong tradition of Mary's queenship. Pope Benedict XV, he wrote a bull in 1748, very famous, Glorious Domine. And he said that Mary is queen of heaven and earth, and that Jesus grants to Mary nearly all his empire and power. That's an important line because, as we're going to see in just a minute, when I talk about Pius XII's radio address to the pilgrims at Fatima, he used that same concept. Okay, but in Benedict XV's bull, he speaks of Mary as the channel of all of Christ's grace as well. So there's this idea of her queenship, but she's the channel of grace. She's the aqueduct of the grace of Christ. And that notion of Mary being the aqueduct comes from St. Bernard. He had a great sermon called De Aqueducto, where he speaks of Mary as the channel of all the grace of Christ, which has been quoted by popes. Not only Benedict XV back in 1748, but I know Pius X did so as well in his encyclical on the 50th anniversary of Mary's Immaculate Conception, Ad Diem Illum, on that day. That was written in, I think, 1904. But Father Most points out that, as I quote him here, the solidly theological reasons for her title as queen are expressed splendidly by Pius XII's radio message. May 13th, 1946, the pilgrims were gathered there for an anniversary of Mary's appearance. Now, May 13th is the first appearance of Our Lady to three children, Lucia, Jacinto, and Francisco, yes. And in fact, May 13th is now on the calendar as a liturgical feast. Pope John Paul II put it there. It's an optional memorial, however. I wish it were a feast, but anyway. This is what Pius XII said to the pilgrims at Fatima in a radio address. He was in Rome at the time. He, the Son of God, reflects on his heavenly mother the glory, majesty, and dominion of his kingship. For having been associated to the King of Martyrs in the unspeakable work of human redemption, as mother and cooperator, she remains forever associated to him. Here he's talking about Mary's co-redemption. Okay? Mother, cooperator, associate. Okay? Forever associated with him, she remains with a practically unlimited power in the distribution of the graces which flow from the redemption. Jesus is king throughout all eternity by nature and by right of conquest. See, where did that come from? Leo XIII. Okay. By nature and by right. Leo XIII said this in his encyclical Annum Sacrum, okay, 1899. Okay. He's quoting that here and then applying the same to Mary. Okay. So Jesus is king by nature, because he's God, by right of conquest, through him, with him, and subordinate to him, as Paul said nicely, okay? It's a subordinate position of Mary. I mean, Mary is not the same level as Christ, okay? But in a subordinate way to Christ, Mary is queen by grace, by divine relationship, by right of conquest, and by singular choice of the Father. And her kingdom is as vast as that of her Son and God, since nothing is excluded from her dominion. Now, he's picking up on that language. I'll just go right there, okay? From Benedict XV, okay? Nearly all his empire and power he grants to Mary. So, her kingdom is as vast as that of her Son and God. Nothing is excluded from her dominion. Her queenship is universal, in other words. Okay? This is a really significant teaching. And Father Most gives an analysis of this. Okay? He says that we notice there are two titles for the kingship of Christ: divine nature and right of conquest, that is the redemption. Okay? She is queen through him, with him, subordinate to him. Her queenship is basically a sharing in the royalty of her Son. We don't think of two powers, one infinite, the other finite. They're inseparable, operate as a unit. So we don't have to say, well, how much of Mary's cooperation is there? What percentage? We don't say that. Okay? We know she's subordinate to him. We don't assign a certain amount of subordination. Okay? We don't do that. Okay? We just understand that she's subordinate to him. All her power derives from him. In other words, okay. And he says of the 4 titles Pius XII gave for her queenship, 2 are closely parallel to those of Christ. He is king by nature as God, she queen by divine relationship. That is, she's the mother of God. Now, on that point, okay, people have favorite books. I have favorite encyclicals. Ad Caeli Reginam, to the Queen of Heaven, is one of my favorite encyclicals. Pius XII's encyclicals are wonderful because he's so clear, and his writing is very easy to read. Okay? He points out that Mary's queenship, he gives 2 basic reasons for Mary's queenship. One is her divine maternity, okay? And it's in number 34 of the encyclical. Divine motherhood as the principle. The main principle on which the royal dignity of Mary rests is without doubt her divine motherhood. So her motherhood is the core dogma. All her other graces, her dignities, her titles flow from her divine motherhood, including her queenship. She is queen because she's mother. And the other basis, and this is number 35, it follows right after that, her cooperation in the redemption. That's what Pius XII says in his encyclical on Mary's queenship. And I'll just quote him here. She is queen not only because of her divine motherhood, but also because God willed her to have an exceptional role in the work of our eternal salvation. And then in 36 he says, now in accomplishing this work of redemption, the Blessed Virgin was most clearly associated with Christ, and it's fitting that we sing in the liturgy. Well, he goes on to quote different things here. Okay? Talks about her. She's the new Eve, who assists the new Adam. It's a wonderful encyclical. If you want to preach on the queenship of Mary, pick up and read the encyclical, and you can quote extensively from him. Anyway, Father Most is telling us that Pius XII, he gives 4 reasons for her queenship. The first 2 are closely related to Jesus. Okay, he's king by nature, she by divine relationship, because she's the mother of the king. Okay, and still further, the ordinary queen mother. The ordinary queen mother gives birth to a child who will later become king. For example, Bathsheba. The Son of Mary is, as we said, eternally king by his very nature. And the second reason, he is king by right of conquest. She too is queen by right of conquest. She conquered, she was victorious, and this title for him means he redeemed us from captivity from Satan. She shared in the struggle and victory as Socia Christi, those are my words, or co-redemptrix. Since the Pope expressed her dependence on him in a threefold manner, it must be, then it is clear that he did not have in mind any other restriction which he did not express. So maintaining the subordination by right of conquest means the same for her as it does for him. So she conquered through being associated with him at the cross. Basically, he spells that out in his encyclical. Okay. And the 2 other titles, she's queen by grace. She's full of grace, the highest in the category of grace besides her Son. And she's queen by singular choice of the Father. A mere human can become king or queen by choice of the people. How much greater is a title? Is a title is the choice of the Father himself. So the Father chooses Mary to be the Queen, mother of his son, Jesus. Okay? And Pius XII added, nothing is excluded from her dominion as mediatrix of all graces in heaven now. That's what we're treating next week, I believe, okay? Who share in earning all of the graces. She is, as Benedict XV said, that's an encyclical from 1748, or the bull, suppliant, Benedict XV, that was in I think it was 1918. Okay? He called her suppliant omnipotence. Okay? Suplex, the omnipotent helper, suppliant, okay, for us. Okay? She, united with her Son, can obtain by her intercession anything that the all-powerful God can do by his own inherent power. So that line from Solomon to Bathsheba, his queen mother, anything you ask, I will grant you. Okay? That's applied to Mary. Yes.
Could you explain, as maybe there's a mystery, how...
These are mysteries, yes.
Well, yeah, obviously.
Of course.
How Mary is able to sort of convince Jesus to change his will. I mean, I'm getting my categories all wrong here, but like at the wedding feast at Cana, when she convinced him to change the water into wine, how could Mary want something for us that Jesus doesn't already want for us? Or I don't know, how does that work? How does her intercession work?
Well, I don't think it's that she wants something that is opposed to his will. She wouldn't ask for anything that's opposed to his will. That's how the fathers and doctors and popes explain that. Okay? But she would only ask what is in accord with Christ's will, but, and here we get to the mysterious portion of it, okay? And I'll just quote one saint here, because you have some private revelations that seem to say that Jesus' will is changed, okay? I forget who it was right now. One of the female saints complained to Jesus when she was praying to him for the conversion of a sinner. And Jesus said, I will not grant him that grace. And the saint, I think it was Teresa of Avila, said, fine then, I will go to your mother. And then Jesus said, then I cannot refuse you. So you could say that because Jesus knows past, present, future, he intended to grant this petition through his mother, but the saint hadn't asked for it yet, so. And when she did ask through Mary, Jesus granted it. But did Mary know that in heaven all along? I'm sure she did. So it's the M word. It's the mystery. Okay. You could write a doctorate of
dissertation. I knew it. I knew the answer was a good mystery at the end. I just thought.
Yes. Yes. I think we're about done. Any other questions or comments? But read the encyclical on Queenship. I mean, it is just terrific because the Pope offers scriptural basis, offers basis from the fathers. He quotes many of the fathers and doctors of the church, previous popes, quotes the sacred liturgy, east and west, okay? Litany of Our Lady, Rosary art, just as Dr. Sri does, okay? But then he really hones in on the basis. It's Mary's motherhood and her association with Christ and redemption, okay? I'll just mention one thing here too, okay? I'm sure everyone's heard of consecration to Mary, right? There's also something called entrustment to Mary. Popes use both terms. There's a little difference in the terms, okay? And I like to distinguish it in this way. We entrust ourselves to a mother. So, in the language of the popes, although they tend to blur the distinction sometimes in the language they use, John Paul II does anyway. When we're talking about entrusting ourselves, we're talking about Mary's motherhood. When we're consecrating ourselves, we're talking about Mary's queenship, because she has authority over us, and we're giving back to her what is already hers by title that she merited and conquered by her cooperation with Christ. Okay, and popes tend to make that distinction in the way they phrase their prayers of entrustment and consecration, although John Paul II mixes it all up. He uses both terms kind of interchangeably, but more so consecration to Mary as queen, okay? Entrustment to Mary as mother. Well, we'll end in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. We fly to thy patronage, O Holy Mother of God. Despise not our prayers and our necessities, but ever deliver us from all dangers, O glorious and Virgin Mary. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. And gentlemen, we'll see you next week. Oh, I have your papers from 3 weeks ago.